Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with me, Christian Harris. In our recent State of Safety survey, one of the top challenges identified by health and safety leaders was how to make change stick. And that's why I've invited my guest this week, Jo Britton, onto the podcast. Jo, who's sometimes known as the CEO Whisperer, is a neuroleadership and neurosculpting coach who helps senior leaders perform under pressure with clarity and staying power. Together, we explore what neuroscience can teach us about change, why our brains are wired for comfort, not transformation, the fight, flight, and freeze responses that often show up in safety contexts, and how models like SCARF, which I think you'll find really, really valuable, can help leaders regulate themselves, engage their teams, and influence culture and safety culture more effectively. If you've ever struggled to get people to embrace change in safety, Jo's insights will give you some practical, brain-based tools to make it happen. Hope you enjoy this episode. Cheers.
Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with Christian Harris. We believe that proactive safety and risk management powers business performance. Each week we explore this theme, sharing guests, stories, insights, trends, hints and tips. You can find us on all the major podcasting platforms, and video versions are available on YouTube. But for now, let's join the conversation with Christian.
Thanks for joining me on the podcast, Jo.
Oh, it's brilliant to be with you. Thanks, Christian.
Good stuff. And we're both, for those watching video, we're both looking lovely in our resplendent in our green tops today.
I know, and it wasn't planned, was it?
No, it wasn't planned. It definitely wasn't planned. No. I'm the king of block colour polo shirts, so it could be any number of colours, but it just happens to be green today.
Well, I love it. I usually wear a lot of green, but I'm a block colour queen as well. So yeah.
There we go. Green's good though, because it's all about, positivity, and that's kind of what we're talking about today, making things happen, how to drive and affect change. So let's start there. So you refer to yourself as the CEO Whisperer, is that right?
Well, it's a name that I've been given actually by quite a number of my clients, because I coach, and often I start coaching at a really senior level with CEOs and MDs. And a couple of them had sort of said to me, "Oh, you're a bit like, there's a horse whisperer. You're like the CEO whisperer." And I thought, "Oh, I'll claim that. I'll have that."
Yeah, it's a good name. Yeah,
yeah,
it's a good name. And actually, for the people joining us today, for the audience, one of the big challenges, if you're in safety risk management, is how to influence the senior leadership team. So I thought that would really resonate with the audience. So yeah, hence getting you on.
Great.
So whilst the audience is primarily in safety and risk, we'll talk obviously more broadly than that, 'cause you're working across sectors and industries. But what would you say are the biggest challenges that leaders face when they're trying to change behaviours or culture within organisations?
Well, it is that thing, change. Everything I think we're doing as leaders is about navigating change or leading change or helping people to adopt change, because the world never stands still, does it? And I think particularly over recent times, the world is such a different pace, and a different place to be. And so what I do is I work a lot with senior leadership teams and those that report to them actually, to help them navigate through quite unpredictable times. And it all comes down to leadership. So I always ask the question when I'm working with people, hands up in the room, who are the leaders? And the official leaders with that in their job title will put their hand up. But my expectation is, well, come on, everybody's a leader. I want to see everybody's hands up. And I think that's certainly true. And I think we forget that as individuals, we're all leaders. We're all leading ourselves every single day, whether that's at home, in community, ourselves. We are the most important group. So it's really a lot of the work that I focus on is about navigating and adopting change. And I think from a health and safety perspective as well, it's quite a tough gig,
Mm.
um, because you're having to influence a lot, often without the resources. Let's face
Y-
it, it can be a
Yeah.
real challenge to get resources, to get people's time, to get people's buy-in. So you're often on your own as well. You generally don't have huge teams around you either, do you?
Yeah.
So I help people, whether you're in an official leadership capacity, or a professional, mostly it's about change, and
Yeah.
change always means behavioural change. And I know from a health and safety point of view, that's massive. That's what
Yeah.
we're trying to do as health and safety professionals, is affect behavioural change.
Mm. Mm. And when it comes to change, when we spoke before to set this up, you said that brains are wired for comfort rather than change. So, kind of, how does that play out when people are asked to adopt new practices or reporting procedures or processes? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, it's massive. And I think we don't understand enough about ourselves, to recognize that from a brain's point of view, brains, as you say, they're wired for comfort. So they're wired for predictability, comfort, and support, and nothing about change. Is that right? Okay. So, but paradoxically, the brain is changing all the time. So I know that I've worked with quite a few people who feel very resistant to change. Sometimes they admit it. So I've had people in my teams where they've gone, I don't like change. They've actually been really, really good at it. But often what you see, I think, whenever we talk about change, whether that's, new policies, procedures, whatever you're trying to get somebody or teams or a business to adopt, often we'll see one of a couple of things. We either see people fighting against it, don't we? So that sort of resistance to it. Or sometimes we'll see people that nod along as if they're with you, but actually nothing changes, about their
Yeah.
behavior. And some of that's that kind of freeze response. So what we need to really understand is more about brain and body and how that works. And so, because the brain is not wired for it, but it's capable of it because the brain's changing all the time. This is called neuroplasticity. It's kind of science's term for the way that we learn things. There's this kind of paradox. We think we can't change, but actually we can because we're doing it all the time. Because the
Yeah.
brain's actually a prediction machine. So all it's ever doing is trying to navigate through the world based on what it thinks is going to happen next, based on previous experiences that we've had. Now, when it comes to change, for a lot of people, they may have, even if we position it as good change, and this particularly from a health and safety point of view, this is positive stuff, right? Isn't it?
Yeah.
This is
Exactly. Yeah.
all about looking after the health, well-being, and the safety of our people.
Hence the green, right?
That's the green. Yeah, exactly. It's always good change.
Yeah.
Nobody in health and safety is coming along to make you feel like afraid of something, but we're wrapping it up in like this is positive change, and then we wonder why are people resistant to it? Why don't people like hear what we're saying? Why are they not buying into it? Because
Yeah.
from a brain's point of view, change is change. Doesn't matter whether it's positive change or it's what we might perceive as the negative change. It's change, right? So it's going
Right.
to do one of those two things. It's likely to go fight against it, run away from it, so flee, or freeze, withdraw, and not doing anything about it.
Yeah. I'm a freezer.
You're a
I'm a
freezer.
freezer. Yeah, I'm a freezer. Yeah, I don't like confrontation. I'm too lazy to run away. So, so, but no, I'm more of a freezer when things go wrong for me. Yeah, so it's an interesting one. So I've been trying to obviously work on that and overcome that one on a personal level. But I mean, if from that perspective, thinking about those three responses, um, and that happens when, in the safety world, that happens when we try and affect change. It happens when something happens, or when, maybe uh, somebody goes against a rule or sort of bends a rule, and we're trying to enforce those rules. So, if we know those three reactions are there, how do we do better at kind of dealing with people in those sorts of scenarios?
Mm. This all comes down to, I think, awareness first, right? And I think we need to become aware of our, like you've just said, your reaction is to freeze and sort of not do
Yeah,
anything. And there's a brilliant model that I love that it's so simple for people to get their heads around and to use really practically every day. And it's a neural leadership model coined by Dr. David Rock, and his work is phenomenal. To go and check his work out.
yeah,
And the model is called SCARF, and it stands for status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And the way that it works is that our nervous system can go in one of four directions. So we've talked about three of them already. So
yeah,
we've talked about fight or flight. So if I, let me just use my prop here. I've got a pen here. Think about
yeah,
that as your nervous system spectrum. So on the one side, we will have a sympathetic arousal response. So fight or flight. This is that kind of midbrain dominance. So if you were to do this right now and you were to put your, do it with me, Christian, fingers right above your ears and you were
yeah.
to push them,
Do you want me to do it?
yeah, do it with me. For
Go
those
on.
that are
Right.
watching, and if you were to push them all the way
Yeah,
through your skull so they met in the
yeah,
middle, you would be in your midbrain.
yeah.
So midbrain is evolutionary, your ancient brain, and developed just after brainstem, sorry.
Right.
And so evolutionary, it hasn't really changed. So it's your life-saving gift part, like your midbrain. It's home to the fight flight system. So if the brain perceives there's threat to life, whether that's real or imagined, then you become midbrain dominant.
Hmm.
And midbrain dominance then means, right, kick into action. What happens? You get sympathetic arousal. So this fight, flight, the neurochemistry, adrenaline, cortisol, shooting around your body, go into the parts of your body that need the most to help you fight or flee.
Yeah,
Um, so vital resources to muscle masses, so you might experience contraction in muscles. So sometimes a stress-based response, fear-based response. For me, sometimes it's like my jaw gets really tight, or I feel
yeah,
tense in my hands or whatever. Or you might then also feel it as a racy heart or shallow breath, or your digestion goes offline, that funny feeling that you get in your tummy.
yeah,
So really important when sympathetic arousal, when your life is really in danger, because it helps you go. It's your go and mobilization juice. So that's one direction for the nervous system. Then if you go extreme the other side, extreme parasympathetic response, this is a bit like your freeze response
yeah,
or withdrawal. And in the middle, so fight, flight, two responses, third response, extreme parasympathetic, but in the middle is fourth direction, which is parasympathetic homeostasis, rest and digest when we're all nice and calm. So the first point around awareness is understanding for each of us what triggers, maybe inappropriately, the fight, flight, or freeze
yeah,
response. Yeah. So when it comes to change, often like perhaps you freeze um because the brain's that prediction machine, it hasn't got a prediction for if I do this thing, what's going to happen? And the brain's really good at asking itself really bad questions that start
yeah,
with if. Yeah. What if I do this thing and this really bad thing happens and and you kind of spiral and catastrophize? So for some of us that can mean that sort of freeze response. For some of us, that thing that triggers, whether it's change, and maybe in the past I've had an experience that really wasn't good when it came to change. Maybe I've been in an organization that did this change really badly, whether
yeah.
that's with health and safety or whatever.
Hmm.
And for me, I get really angry about it. That's, the sympathetic arousal response. So the scarf model is really, really helpful because what we can understand is in ourselves first, what triggers sort of either side of that spectrum, and then how do we bring ourselves back into sort of rest and digest? So S, status, really important. If you think about if my status is challenged in a particular way that doesn't make me feel good, then that might trigger either
Yeah.
uh, sympathetic arousal or extreme parasympathetic
Yeah.
arousal. So if you
So
think
if you get
about it,
undermined or something,
yeah, exactly
you're
that.
feeling undermined. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. So think about it, if you think about it in the context of health and safety, where might we, when we're trying to influence people around change, where might we trigger their sense of
Yeah.
status being
So if
undermined?
Yeah, so if we come from our sort of health and safety ivory tower and we tell the frontline workers who've been doing this job for years, don't do it that way, you need to do it this way. And they
Yeah.
think, well, hold on a second, you've got no idea what you're talking about. This is how we need to do this job.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and each of us is wired, with the same biology and the same neurochemistry, but very different experiences.
Yeah.
So that threat of status to them, even though it's not real threat, I'm not threatening your life in this moment, but the brain's perceiving it based on past experiences that this is threat to my role, threat to my status in the role or whatever. And it can send people in any of those directions, but probably most people, because we're not aware of this, are not sitting there in rest and digest homeostasis. So
Mm.
we're in midbrain, that stress response. And for most of us, actually, every single day, whether we're in a leadership position, whether we're not, we're living in that stress arousal response a lot of the time. And it isn't good for brain and body. It sets us up for nasties. And I'm sure from a health and safety community point of view, we do a lot of work on stress, don't we, with people and
Yeah,
how
yeah,
to
of
manage
course. Yeah.
stress. So
Mm.
status is one of those. Certainty is the next one. So
Right.
if I don't feel certain about something, then that's going to trigger midbrain dominance as well. And change isn't certain, is it?
No.
But there is a good substitute for change because we can never promise. I don't think I've ever been involved in or led a change program or behavioral program where I've been able to absolutely promise this is definitely going to be the outcome on this particular day and this is how you're going to feel about it. I'd be lying if I did that, right?
Mm.
And of
Mm.
course, what a lot of us have done is done change like that in the past. And of course, the road to change is really bumpy and we never quite get there in the way that we thought we would on the
Yeah.
time date that we thought we would or how we would feel. Some people get really suspicious. So we can never guarantee certainty in anything, but what we can do, which is a good substitute, is offer people clarity
Yeah.
around things. So if you think from a health and safety perspective, what might that look like?
So you might say, for example, draw on experiences of where another organization or another site in the same company or whatever has done basically this same they've implemented this same change and it worked for them as a case study, maybe to give that kind of more um, comfort around the change.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can set out this is the aim and the goal, and we can give people the steps that we're going to take along the way and
Yeah, is
allow
that where like
people.
a visual model is quite helpful, isn't it? In that sense, I mean, you probably do that. I do this in my business. You know, we have like a map of like here's the journey that you'll go on, and here are the different steps, and that helps
Amazing.
people to sort of visualize it, so that gives them that bit more certainty.
It does, and it's the clarity. This is what we're going to
Mm.
do next because sometimes we'll kind of say something. Maybe we're quite good at setting the goal, but how we get there, we're not always great at explaining, and so that can create a lot of uncertainty for people as well. So, for some people, that sense of uncertainty is a big trigger for them, a big arousal, stress-based trigger.
Yeah,
A in SCARF is autonomy.
yeah,
So if I feel like I have a sense of control over events, then I calm down. If I don't, then I'm going to get midbrain dominant again. So again, from a health and safety point of view, what would we be doing to help people get on board with this so that they have a sense of control and autonomy over
Yeah.
things.
But that's where you need to be engaging in advance, isn't it? And getting rallying people to the cause and making them feel as if they're involved in this change rather than it being enforced on them, I suppose. And then maybe also giving them a bit of, maybe it's frameworks rather than very strict rules, rather than you must do this at
Yeah.
this time. It's kind of like, well, this is what we're trying to achieve. Use your discretion, use your skills and experiences and sort of work within that framework so they feel as if they're
I love
still,
that.
yeah, doing what they kind of want to do. Yeah.
I love that. And that's one of the things we work on quite a lot with organizations. Whatever level that you're at or whatever kind of role that you're in, part of it is a bit around, it's a similar thing with delegation with people as well, right? And this, some managers who are living in a stress, fear-based kind of response a lot of the time are afraid to delegate. And
Yeah.
what ends up happening is the behavior becomes micromanagement and that just annoys people. So yeah, if you can give people a framework or some boundaries that says this is the outcome, these are the sorts of kind of rules and the boundaries, but within that you can operate however you like, then that's a really good way of giving people some autonomy
Yeah.
around things. Um, the F stands for fairness. Now, this is a really big one, and this is a really big one for me personally, because I also have a very strong value about fairness. So if I perceive things are unfair, for me, I just go like 0 to 100, like really,
Yeah.
really quickly. Um, so that sense of fairness, equity, how might that play out in a health and safety
Yeah. So
context?
I was with a client last week and they were sort of saying how there's a bit of a us and them feeling sometimes. So they're in the manufacturing space and they have, rules around reverse parking and, you've got to hold on to the handrail on the stairs and things like that, all of which are sensible within that kind of environment. But if you go to the head office and you see the
Mm.
management teams, it's totally opposite, and they don't do it. And so there's that feeling of, yeah, that's not fair. Why should we have to do this if they're not going to do it?
Absolutely. And that's a massive one in any organization, whatever function as well, where we have some form of policy, culture, behavioral standards that we roll out, and most of us adopt them as good corporate citizens. And then there's somebody that doesn't, or there are
Yeah,
people that don't, and they don't get challenged, or their behavior isn't questioned,
yeah,
or I've seen this a lot in sales teams as well, actually, where
mm,
somebody really not adopting the behavioural requirements or standards, but they're a great salesperson and they bring in the deals, and so just leave them alone. I
yeah,
mean, that is a huge like trigger for people for their
mm.
nervous system to go absolutely wild. Um, and oh, sorry, I went to the F, the R scarf.
Don't worry, I wasn't gonna let you miss the R.
I would, yeah, the R is relatedness. So this goes back to tribal times, really. If as humans we need to be part of a tribe, or we did in those times, because if we weren't, what happened?
Danger, yeah,
Danger, we died, And so if I don't relate to you, like as humans, we're kind of wired to see people as friend or foe. So if I don't see you as friend, I'm going to like treat you as the enemy. And if you don't get me, then that's going to like trigger me. And that's it's a little bit like I always think about this at home in relationships with people. Say you're in a new relationship with somebody and everything's going swimmingly well. And then something comes on the news and it's a political thing, and suddenly you discover you've both got very different political views on something. That kind of relatedness thing can get really challenged. Do I really relate? Or
mm.
does this person really relate with me? So, what would you say from a health and safety perspective would be the thing around that that might trigger people's nervous systems unhelpfully?
Probably the thing that sort of springs to mind is if there's a sense of saying one thing and doing another, maybe. So like if you see on the website, safety is our number one priority, and I, whether that's the right sort of statement to use or not, we can discuss separately. But if you're saying safety is important, you know, on the one hand, but on the other hand, your actions are not aligned with that, that would, I guess, foster a sense of, that they don't care about me, they're not interested in this, and
Yeah.
is that kind of where,
Yeah, that's a really
yeah,
good example. And you do see that a lot, don't you? It's a little bit like where we see company values that are put on
yeah,
websites or on walls and things like that. And actually nobody really adopts them or challenges somebody that doesn't adopt that behavior. I think also part of it is probably a little bit like that if we don't engage with people to get them on board as well, and we
yeah,
just come with I think you said it before, if it's the ivory tower approach of,
yeah,
this is what you're going to do. But you haven't taken the time to really understand what's that person's role, what are the challenges for them, what's going to make this tricky for them to do.
yeah,
Like sort of really get to know somebody like on a personal level, and how what we're proposing may or may not be the easiest or best way to do it. That can
mm,
also, well, you don't understand my job. You're coming to me to tell me to do this, but you don't understand what I do, or how hard I work, or why we have to do it this way, or why we've tried this before and it hasn't worked, so all that
mm,
relatedness stuff. And the way I like to think about scarf is to use it as a verb or an adjective as well. Like, am I being scarfed in the moment? So that's why that awareness first of what are the things myself that happen that trigger those responses for me. So as the health and safety professional, what is it if I'm going to try and influence? And maybe for me some of that is if I gone into a meeting and I hadn't been heard, or my idea had been dismissed or had been negated, and
yeah,
which can happen quite a lot when you're trying to influence something and you're the lone person really to do it, that something like that would scarf me. So the first exercise to do is to run through that. So status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, fairness, and understand what would scarf you.
mm,
Because when you're in a dysregulated nervous system, you're in midbrain, and I nickname that part of the brain Frankenstein, right?
yeah,
So Frankenstein is, as I said before, is a life-saving gift when we need him. If there's a car hurtling towards us and we have to mobilize and get out of the way, we absolutely need fight flight to save our life. That's an appropriate use of him. But for
mhm,
most of the time, and most of us, we're living in that. If you just look, I've always like, now I kind of sort of relate to this more. You see it in organizations all the time, everybody, and
mm,
yourself walking around in a stress-based Frankenstein response. And that's not good. So being able to understand what kind of triggers you, what scarfs you, is number one.
mhm,
Write those things down, because then you've got awareness. Because what we want to do is tip ourselves into, from being aware of a midbrain dominant Frankenstein, not very helpful, into prefrontal cortex, so front of the brain, that has all, where you can access all your best self qualities, the stuff you put on your CV.
yeah,
Like, I'm a problem solver, like I'm compassionate, I have empathy, I'm motivated, I set and achieve goals, are all the product of here. And that
right,
part of the brain I nickname is your Einstein brain.
okay, yeah,
But there's an inverse relationship between them, right? So if you're not really in both parts of the brain at the same time. So if I'm walking around in a stress fear-based response, Frankenstein's at the top of the seesaw.
yeah,
Einstein's offline. I can't access my influence and capability because I don't have capacity to access it. So I need to know how to switch the seesaw to the other way. And that's where a lot of the work that I do, sort of brain-based tools,
yeah,
help people to do that. Um, because once you're aware, you can have those meetings, conversations that can be quite challenging in front brain dominance, prefrontal, being prefrontal with it, where from your nervous system perspective, you're in parasympathetic rest and digest. That bit's the Einstein genius zone, which is going to give you access to, all of those qualities.
mm. Very interesting, and I think a really valuable way to to look at this, isn't it? And as you say, I think if you can understand kind of what triggers you, if that's the right word, within Scarf, then have that awareness, and then at least you get that's going to move you, isn't it, further to being able to understand and empathize with other people at least. You might not be
100%.
able to, you know, you might not sort of be able to jump straight to, excuse me, understanding every single person, but at least you'll kind of think, right, how can I then position what I'm doing in a way that sort of softens each of those five areas and sort of is bears those areas in mind. I suppose that's the next step,
That's
is
the
it?
next step. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly the next step. So we use it first for ourselves so that we can regulate ourselves, come back to rest and digest, access Einstein qualities that we need. And then we can say, okay, with this thing that I want to influence or I want to change, how am I going to use Scarf to help me influence a better outcome? So what is it that I'm about to do that might hit on somebody's sense of status?
Mm.
How can I give more clarity to people? Where can I bring them a sense of autonomy? How can I make this in a way that, I relate to them? How do I make it fair? So whatever your plan is or your strategy is, run it through the SCARF model,
Yeah.
first of all, as well. Then the next side of that is so you can proactively plan. The next side of it is actually good to, right, I'm aware that I might scarf somebody on these things now. So how can I now use scarf to elevate somebody's sense of status in this? To give them even more certainty. So we can use it in lots of different ways. And I think what's
Yeah.
brilliant about it's such a simple model for people to get their heads around. What I notice in organizations is this really starts to just change the culture by default because people
Mm.
start, first of all, they start just having conversations around that was a bit scarfy for me, without people really taking offense because we've got a common language around it.
Yeah.
And that's really helpful because sometimes we get into these conversations where if somebody's in fight mode, it can get like really difficult. And then for somebody who may be like you that might withdraw, we might go into procrastination or avoidance. I'm not going to
Yeah.
avoid having that conversation. I'm not going to do it,
Yeah.
right? Whereas if we all learn the SCARF system or the SCARF model, we can literally just say, "You've just scarfed me then." And the other person will have a bit of a laugh and go, "I'm really sorry. What did I hit as
Mm.
part of that?" So it's a super simple way of changing culture. So I
Mm.
think it's a brilliant tool for health and safety professionals to be able to adopt
Yeah.
because you really are kind of pretty much on your own and having to navigate through a lot of stuff really requires a lot of prefrontal activity, which by the way gets exhausted really quickly. So that's the other thing that you need to be aware of.
Yeah. You can't be in that space 8 hours a day, 5 days a week.
No, most of us try and be because
Yeah.
we're back-to-back meetings, we're doing thinking work, we're, busy home lives. I mean, the kind of story I usually tell is by 10 o'clock, 10 a.m., this part is really gone tired and exhausted. Because by the time you've got up, if you've got, kids to get sorted for school, you've navigated traffic to work, there's been some idiot who's cut you up on the motorway. You've probably been in, like most of us, been in your email at home already. You've maybe been scrolling social media. By the time you get to work and it gets to about 10 o'clock, you've pretty much exhausted the capacity here. And
Mm.
the default when that is exhausted is midbrain.
Yeah.
It's Frankenstein. So kind of most of your work day then is spent in a part of your brain and nervous system that's not healthy and is not great for you, trying to
Yeah.
influence the things that you do.
Mm. Mm. Is there sort of like a mid ground between those two areas where it's kind of more like, I don't know, you're sort of like coasting and going through the motions, and do you know what I mean? So taking that example of, your working day, you're kind of exhausted your front brain stuff. Is there rather than, or is that an aspiration that you can sort of straddle the two somehow so that you're not in the kind of Frankenstein back of the brain, but there's something in the middle that's kind of a bit more positive?
Well, that would be
Does that make sense?
yeah, exactly makes sense, and that would be your rest and digest
Right.
kind of like that area. However, what I will say is, um, this really depends, right? Because some of us that it's unrealistic to say that we're going to be in rest and digest all the time,
Yeah.
and we shouldn't be, because we're going to need um, pr sympathetic arousal and an element of stress is good for us, right?
Yeah.
Because it helps us keep motivated, and motivation is required to keep us alive. That's what motivation is as well. It's when it tips over into the extreme side of sympathetic arousal that does no good for like bodies and behavior,
Yeah.
right? And the other side is extreme parasympathetic, which is almost like our shutdown mode as
Mm.
well. So trying to sort of make sure that we keep coming back to balance, we're never going to be in that state 100%
Yeah.
unless I don't know, we're a Buddhist monk that sort of like meditates 24 hours a day, sort of,
Yeah.
when they're in that state. So I think it's important to know because, it's not that all stress is bad. We need some stress. It's if it's too
Yeah.
extreme, it doesn't help. So
Yeah.
that's why I think having the awareness of what are the things that make me extreme that can bring me back. Because in very stressful periods for me, that has meant that I've gone into an extreme sort of call it dorsal parasympathetic response where I couldn't get out of bed. I was really depressed. I
Mm.
had no motivation. That's no good for us
No.
either.
Yeah.
So it's learning tools and techniques that help you move the seesaw
Yeah.
along. And there's
Mm.
like really simple things we can do that help us do that. And
Mm.
one of them is using our breath. So if I'm very sympathetically aroused on that side of the spectrum, and people will say all the time, breathe, for goodness sake, breathe, right? But for me, if I take in like a deep inhale when I'm very sympathetically aroused, and I go, sometimes I can't get my breath in, it feels even worse, right?
Mm.
What I want to do to slow it down and move the dial back is to start with a very deep exhale. So make that longer first and then a smaller inhale, because that's going to help me move back into rest and digest. Whereas if I'm the other side and I'm parasympathetically extremes, I can't move, I've got no energy, then what I want to do is use my breath differently because I want to sort of like, it's like put the accelerator on, whereas the other
Mm.
side is put the brake on. So I
Yeah.
want to take some really big sort of quick breaths like that because that's going to like accelerate the nervous system. So it's
Mm.
really important to recognize, where am I on the spectrum and what do I need to do in that moment to shift it back
Yeah.
into a better
Mm.
space for me.
Mm. Yeah. Really, really interesting. Really interesting. Lots to think about and lots of you know, positive steps that people can take off the back of that and just using that framework and those tips to really make a difference. So, that's great. Before we wrap up, because it feels weird to say, but we've already kind of got to where we were aiming to time wise, even though we could have chatted on this for hours. Um, give us a bit of an overview of kind of, someone's listening to this resonates with them. What can you do to help as your within your business?
Well, I work with both individuals, but lots of organizations, whether that's leadership teams or teams of professionals. At the heart of what I'm doing is helping, from a business point of view, helping you improve your business performance, your team performance, and that all comes down to people, doesn't it? And it's
Yeah,
applying these tools and techniques in context in your own organization. And as we talked about right at the beginning, often this is really about how do we navigate change and how do we change behavior.
yeah,
And I do that in different ways, either one-to-one in a coaching type capacity, or as teams in group settings within organizations. So that's probably the biggest way that I help people sort of apply brain-based approaches, help people get nervous system literacy, I
Yeah.
think that's super important. It's the thing that I think I wish I'd have been taught through my career,
Yeah.
having had senior leadership positions and wondered why I reacted in certain ways, because that had an impact on me and my confidence and all sorts of things as well.
Yeah.
So if that is something that you want to improve business performance, essentially the bottom line, but it's through people, then that
Hmm.
would be the thing to come and get in contact with me. I hang about a lot on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
sharing lots of tools and tips like every day. I've got lots of free sort of guides and things. So come and connect with me as Jo Britton on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Jo. Learned a lot. I'll be going away and trying to scarf things up in my team, and even actually in my communication. And it's a great way of just thinking about how to influence people generally, isn't it? Running through your marketing materials even and saying, right, where does, what effect is
Absolutely.
this
Mm,
having on people? So I think that's a really valuable framework. And I was writing it down, as you probably noticed, as we went through.
I
So
did.
yeah,
Right.
so you've definitely got me on board. So thank you so much. And thanks to you for joining Jo and I, and we'll see you again next week on another episode of the podcast.
Thanks for joining us on the Safety and Risk Success podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit follow and do share on social media. Does anyone you know spring to mind as a great guest, even yourself? If so, please contact us on podcast@slipsafety.co.uk. See you next week for another episode.